I mean, America has so many different cultures in it, right? The South, the West, the East, those are all like different countries, basically. It's a gigantic place. But you see that like humans psychologically are the same everywhere. Well, I think they're one of many examples of like how tribes are constituted. But I think a tribe it's a virtual and flexible object in our minds. We're meant to defend this first and foremost, whoever's our social group.
Maybe it is our evolutionary purpose to expand the sense of community because this was not enough, for everybody.
I love that.
Is it possible to get a sense of a tribe through the workplace?
What constitutes human experience and like seeing the effects of people either playing to the whole world is my tribe or only this small group is my tribe.
What do you think constitutes experience for you?
Or like, what am I directly experiencing, right? What am I sensing? What context can I add to that to make some sense of it? What context can I annotate this experience with in my brain?
Well, what was that thing that really made people get together and like really jazz?
Context.
I love that word. Context?
Context.
Yeah. Wow. So those who set the context set the relationships.
Yes.
What happened between like the Josh of before going into a political campaign and the Josh after? So
that's such a great question.
What changed you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just like one-on-one experience, like organizing volunteers and like what motivates people, I think I pretty much had the same objectives when I came out, but I saw the world a little differently. So when you see different parts of, America has so many different cultures in it, right? The South, the West, the East, those are all like different countries, basically. It's a gigantic place. But you see that like humans psychologically are the same everywhere, right?
I was just thinking about that when we were having our conversation earlier.
Right?
Like, we really are so similar,
right?
In so
Isn't it
many
amazing?
ways.
Yeah, and like culture's different, right? So like how you interact or how you might start a conversation or, habits or manners or whatever. But
wouldn't you say culture is a bit of like a more, me going also to like how I studied like storytelling and the Carl Jung stereotypes and all of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if culture is not more of a shallow thing that we are sort of dwelling in terms of social conversations. Maybe. But once you get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. Like what makes people tick.
Yes.
Right? I agree. I think
we're all kind of the same. So that was your realization after the campaign.
Both my parents were computer programmers, and I tend to think of things in like computer metaphors sometimes, which is a little simplistic, but like I think of human psychology as like the hardware,
Yeah.
And culture is like the software.
Oh. Wait, so human psychology is the hardware.
Yeah.
And human culture is the software.
Yeah, like
none
of them are really the day-to-day experience. You take the day-to-day experience.
I love that we're talking about this, and we're like in the ancient civilization part.
Exactly. That's like a traditional instrument, I guess.
Okay.
Playing.
But say it again. So the hardware. What would the hardware?
The hardware would be like our instincts. Our the way we behave as individuals and groups, because of how we evolved as like groups of monkeys fighting each other on the savannah. And some of those instincts are really fucking cool and beautiful, and some of them are horrifying. And I guess that's just sort of part of how I see the world is that like we have a lot of potential in us and a lot of power. We can do a lot of good stuff with it.
Kind of goes back to what we were talking about, like how how sort of like fascism sort of spread around people is that we see a tribe that is going to threaten our survival, and therefore we aggregate in groups of people that in order to defeat that other enemy. Let me just go look at that. I love that.
I think we sort of see ourselves in a tribe as by default. I don't even know if we really know how to think outside of our being in a tribe in the first place, I think, are even if you think of like loners who have no real friends or peers or whatever, and someone who's alive.
Yeah.
I think they usually like, if you ask them who their heroes are, you can very often, get names of like dead authors and philosophers and whoever else, right? That they see themselves and want to model themselves after.
So no one in their physical lives, no one like in their physical, is that what you mean? Their community or in their
even in the
reality?
Extreme case, I'm saying where people don't have peers, where they don't feel like they have a local tribe. I don't know that our brains are adapted to think outside the concept of tribe in general. I think we always sort of see ourselves connected to someone or some group of people that we want to impress or defend or whatever, right? And I think I love that you and we can take that and like be like, oh yeah, that's all of humanity for us, right? That's our tribe. I don't think it's usually that way. I think there's more people than you might expect who think that way, but I think that for most folks, it's their family, their community, their local group, maybe their ethnic group or their religion or whatever, but people they feel like they know and they share interests with, right? But I don't know that we can think outside that paradigm unless we really work on it.
But what do you think kind of shaped that? Because for me, it comes from this guy. I think I just told you earlier. What's his last name? Jacques Fresco. Have you heard of him? Sort of? No?
Sort of, yeah.
Basically, he just says that because we don't have the security of food and shelter, we keep thinking that everyone is out against us. And there's scarcity of mindset. But that, for me, also in terms of like a consciousness level and a conscious being, you know that there's abundance for everybody. There should be abundance for everybody.
Right.
And abundance is your birthright.
Right.
But how can you tap into that in today's world and maybe even like, look at that. This is crazy that we're actually like in the tribe area.
Right? Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
And what is it that they have?
Right. Well, I think they're one of many examples of like how tribes are constituted. But I think a tribe is sort of, it's a virtual and flexible object in our minds as much as it is a physical reality, right? I think we're meant to defend this first and foremost, whoever's our social group, right?
Yeah.
And then
the people in our...
Yeah, because again, we're evolved that way psychologically because if we didn't defend these people, we'd die in terms of like what our wiring is, right?
But now I'm thinking like maybe it is our evolutionary purpose to expand the sense of community because this was not enough, for everybody.
I love that. And then the question is just how, right? Like
through technology, maybe.
That would be fun. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Even though technology might be some sort of like a violent...
Well, it's a tool of power like anything, right? So, tools of power can be used for good or bad, but it depends who they're used by and to what end.
So, wait, let me just go back to the first question. So, Josh, prior to that experience of like managing a campaign and all of that.
Yeah.
And then Josh that came back, sorry, this is so cool.
That's awesome.
That came back and after that, that was your realization that we're all much part of like a more similar basis rather than a different one.
Exactly. And I had that general sense
before
going in, but I really saw it hands-on. Oh, this is fun. They have all these videos that you can,
I love that.
Isn't that great?
I care for you and I want you to survive. Yeah. Was there anything that you thought you believed and that changed completely from that experience? If that makes sense.
Not too much. One of the things that I think is really fun about organizing is it's applied psychology. So you get like very empowered by using it, like
implied psychology. Yeah.
Well, so you get empowered because this is why I love training new people in organizing and seeing them like build a structure in their community or like go lobby a politician on a law and get them to change something or whatever. All these tools are out there, but we're sort of kept atomized and alienated from each other. We're not taught that there are these tools of organizing for power in a democratic society. And what is so cool about being on a campaign is you keep meeting different groups of people and seeing it work, that you can get people jazzed in a certain way, and you can get them excited in a certain way and bought in a certain way. And if you're a bad person, you can take that and use it for really horrible stuff. But if you're a good person...
But what was the thing that really made people get together and like really jazzed? Context. I love that word. Context?
Context. Yeah.
Wow. So those who set the context set the relationships.
Yes. Fuck. Right? Isn't that cool? And I'll give you an example, like tangible context. This is how I train people in organizing, right? So like if you have a volunteer and that volunteer is going out and knocking on doors and they go out and they knock 100 doors for you, they come back and you're like, thanks so much. Oh, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. When can we see you back again? They're very likely to be like, oh, well, this was fun, but like, I don't know when I'm going to do this, right? And that's fine. I'll call you next week, right? And what they're saying is, I'm really busy. I'm glad I fit this in today, but I don't know what you're asking me to do by asking me to come back. Are you asking me to carry your whole campaign? Are you asking me to like just come back one more time, right?
Yeah.
But if instead you're like, oh, wait, we had a goal to knock 500 doors today and you knocked 100. You tell them their number that they did.
Okay.
And be like, you accomplished 20% of our goal as an office today. We need to get you back in here, right?
Okay.
Then the person knows they did something real and contextualized and can see their role in a bigger situation, right? In a bigger picture, and can feel the power that they wielded that day. And then be like, can you come back next Thursday, right? As opposed to being like, when can you come back? Because everyone has busy lives and you want to make stuff simple, direct, and they can always say no to Thursday. And then you'd be like, okay, what about Tuesday? People need you to give them a certain degree of specific guidance, make stuff simple, and be okay with them saying no, but also showing them the part they have in the bigger picture. So I think the problem we have with getting people active is we don't give them enough specific context. We don't tell them where they fit in, right? And when people don't get specific context, everybody's lives are so busy and so fucked up in a lot of ways, and like so hard nowadays because of the system that they're living under, that they don't have time to do good without knowing what good they're doing.
Oh.
But
just the act of living is already doing good.
The act of living is, and that's great, and that's philosophical, but in order to take a wonderful perspective like that, you need to have spare time and space and bandwidth, right? So to tell people, to bring people a little bit out of the daily grind, to bring people a little bit out of their miserable pockets that they're being thrust into by capitalism day after day, you need to show them what they're doing specifically by doing something else.
So that's where the political grasp sort of happens.
Exactly.
That's where the whole, like, but this is almost like religion, and the promise of an identity over like a
tool of power has a new context that it introduces, right? But we aren't meant to jump somewhere we don't have a soft landing, right? If we see that we're an important part of something, this is what I gathered, right? When I was organizing, exactly.
Yeah.
The burden of organizing is on the organizer. We have to create a context for people to see themselves within, and the asks that we make have to be specific, limited, and manageable, and they have to see how fulfilling those asks helps us all contribute to the whole, right? So we're creating a totally new context of action, right? And a different world and how we're building it.
That when managing and creating organization, which is ultimately almost like an organism, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were the things that you saw that really worked? What I'm really interested in is how bringing different people, apparently different, because we were talking about at the beginning, superficially different, with different ideologies. But I guess in this way, they were all part of the same political sort of, right?
Yeah, but the Democratic Party is a very big tent. It's about like half the people in the country.
Maybe it can tap into what I'm saying, but like, oh, wow, look at that. Is it a...
That's awesome. That's a Buddha.
A platinum
maybe.
Buddha.
Or wait, no.
It looks like a Buddha for sure.
It's seated like a Buddha, but it's...
But what would be some of the things that...
Yu Huang, the Lord of Heaven in popular Taoism.
Oh, so he doesn't have Buddha. Because of the beard, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Here's the famous dinosaur.
Yes, isn't that awesome?
It's so awesome.
Yeah, I love
going back to the questions before I forget.
Sure.
So what were some of the... let me ask you. Can I film? Can I?
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you saw that people could really like?
Yeah. In investment in them.
So like basically differences in ideologies would be diminished when someone was investing in them. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
When they're...
When I'm asking them how their day was, when I'm talking to them about their kids and what motivates them to be in the office in the first place, right? When we're relating to each other as human beings and establishing a culture in the office instead of competition, which can sometimes be the norm in political campaigns, of like community. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, we gotta get those jackets out.
Oh, yes, indeed.
All right.
So yeah, when you give people an awesome experience and let them know what they're doing to help, that's when they respond well. When you make it pleasant and fun and energizing to be in the office. And that's the whole thing. Right? And the work itself is enough, usually, plus the fellowship to keep them motivated.
But like this sounds so simple, and yet
it is.
You see most people pretty unhappy, and I would say, in their workplace are not necessarily committed to, you know what I mean?
Well, the workplace is not designed to do that. The workplace is designed to make people, productive under the capitalist model. But
so not to find a sense of identity.
Right.
Okay.
Or purpose
But would you say that it's possible that the workplace would do that? Or did you see that being a possibility?
Oh, absolutely. And there are workplaces that do that better than others, and they tend to, retain their employees better. But I think, it's important to build up structures outside of work.
Is it possible, going back to what I think the theme of this conversation is going to be, to get a sense of a tribe, through the workplace?
It's a great question. I think as someone on the Iberian Peninsula, you'd know more about that because you guys have expressed... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Yeah. Thanks. Have a good night. Why would you say that in the Iberian Peninsula?
We experimented. If I was reading my Wikipedia deep dive correctly, because you guys have done experiments with companies that are more shareholder owned, or not stakeholder owned, right? Employee owned cooperatives and stuff like that. Is that?
I don't know to what extent. I think what's happening right now is very similar to what happens here. That I hear, they give me a share or something.
Yeah.
I don't think they're collectively owned.
Right.
There are some called cooperativas.
The one thing that I think I probably read about cooperativos, et cetera.
Cooperativos, yeah.
Cooperativos. I'm sorry.
I love it.
I just took a glancing view at whatever, and I got a sense it was a bigger part of the culture than it was here, at least at one point.
It is. It is a little bit.
Yeah. But honestly, the one part of organizing I've never done is labor organizing, but I do know that and I'd like to at some point. But I know that, at least in the United States, corporate culture is extraordinarily alienating. And that's somewhat by design, because it's easier to divide and conquer labor power if you make everybody miserable all the time, and that's why our social inequality is just ridiculous, because we had a few golden decades between the 30s and the end of the 30s and the early 70s, when labor unions had a lot of power and the middle class was an assumption. Part of the reason that everybody, resents baby boomers so much is they grew up under that system and with the expectation that they could put themselves through college on one job, because that's what labor organizers designed to be possible coming out of the Gilded Age 100 years ago. So,
was it possible back then?
Yeah. So with
your wage.
But yeah, okay. Between the early, those are sort of the idyllic years people think of mid-century, between 1939 and 1972 or whatever, when, loyalty to a company was rewarded and home loans were easy to get and relatively low interest, and stuff like that made it possible to have a thriving permanent middle class. And then the people in charge saw that they could wring more money by deconstructing all of those things that were put in place during the New Deal, which is, what we called our social reforms in the 1930s. And they took it apart decade by decade, and then by the 90s there was basically nothing left. And
what were the consequences of that, would you say?
Was today's economy, where young people can't reasonably dream of home ownership en masse, and everybody's a paycheck or two away from being on the street. But feeling like we're all still fine, because again, it's sort of all glossed over. And
that's beautiful. I mean, and that's one of the conversations I had, that we're all kind of just pretending that we're not all freaking out that we'll be on the street. I love that you said that, 1 or 2 paychecks away. Yeah. Because, but yet again, maybe this is all also because I always like to think of, where am I going? Yeah, I have.
There's been a lot of news articles about how the philosophy of what constitutes a museum and why it's there has changed a lot over time,
This museum specifically? Or any museum?
Well, any museum, but this museum is a great microcosm, right? Because it started in the early 20th century when museums were the ultimate in progressivism was explore the world, right? Doesn't matter how, doesn't matter if you're killing the world in the process, just explore it, right?
Do you think the concept of traveling nowadays sort of taps into that a little bit, or Yeah,
I mean, I don't know enough about the economics and the ecology of traveling. I just know it seems from everything I've heard, traveling is good for a person's ability to relate to other people, when you're talking about it expanding one's tribe, you can certainly learn a lot more by traveling and experiencing, right?
I'm talking about that for sure.
And I haven't done nearly enough traveling, but
where do you, if you haven't done it, I'm going to put this right here, where do you think your idea of tribe being so worldwide comes from? Because you do have a pretty worldwide, you know that, right?
I mean,
the fact that you kind of like me think that the whole world is your tribe.
Say it right, exactly.
Where do you think it comes from?
Yeah, I think just sort of you're consuming all of these different arguments about what constitutes human experience, and seeing the effects of people either playing to the whole world is my tribe, or only this small group is my tribe. And the people who play to only this small group is my tribe tend to act really fucking violently. And I think I was aware of that at a young age.
You could observe that quite okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you said something I love, because yesterday on the train I was reading Schopenhauer's The Ethics of Will, or the ethics of the 3 problems of ethics, and he was saying he talks a lot about experience, and I love that you said what constitutes experience. What do you think constitutes experience for you?
Oh my God!
This I know is such a deep question, but
is it like, are you asking from a literal philosophical, like what is my experience made of in terms of atoms and whatever? Or
wait, oh wow, that would be awesome.
To me, experience is an immediate thing that where there's always 2 or 3 jobs going on, right? In your day-to-day life. If you're a good person trying to do good in the world, there's 2 to 3 things going on. One is, what am I actually experiencing, right? Based on my knowledge. 2, what context can I add to it? Or like, what am I directly experiencing, right? What am I sensing? What context can I add to that to make some sense of it, right? Based on what I've known, based on my life up till now, based on when I've felt this before, or what other people have said, right? What context can I annotate this experience with in my brain? And 3, if my experience of this, if I think my experience is different because of my annotation than other people, how do I get that across? And is it important to get it across, right? Because we're always put in these situations where, where we feel like we're like educated or whatever, or we have some special insight or whatever. Part of us, especially in nerds in general, right? We want to shout it from the rooftop. You're giving me the chance to do that now, which is incredibly indulgent, and I really appreciate it. But there's so many circumstances that I found where it's so helpful to shut up, right? And it's so helpful to ask way more questions than I try to provide answers for. Because the function of a conversation or an experience or an interaction, most experiences are had with other people, right? Not all, but most. The function is different depending on what you want out of it. And so many social experiences are done to reinforce the sort of tribal connection between the 2 people talking. And listening and inquiring are the absolute best things you can do to make someone love you.
I love that you said that, because I was about to ask that.
Yeah.
But like, our experience has then been limited by the tribal pass downs and the tribal teachings that we've had throughout our existence, frameworks of conditioning, brought up circumstances, all of those that I love, as far as you can go through your
and listen, there's new stuff appearing all the time. I mean, one of the reasons we're a beautiful species is we can take this, and that, and synthesize it all into something new. And we can always add new context from our surroundings. It's one of the reasons why it's so important to build a big and viable and mutually respectful tribe. Because there's always shit that other people see that you don't, right? And you got to figure out what your goal is in life, and use what you know about communicating with other people to help enroll them if you need help.
How would you tap out? Do you know where we are? Are you checking?
I do. Okay. We're not yet in Brooklyn.
Okay, cool.
This is West 4th Street, Manhattan, Lower Manhattan.
Okay, cool.
We're going to
Brooklyn, yeah. So, but like, how would one tap out of that?
Go straight down.